All right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to September's edition of Employers Advantage Live, where we record and we talk about different HR topics. Before we begin, this is exciting as we'd love to welcome our new teammate, Renita Pendergrass, who's our new HR business partner. So welcome, Renita.
Maybe if I take it off mute, you can hear me. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to join the team.
So we're excited to have you as well. And good morning to everyone who's on the team this morning. We're going to talk about something that is really front and center to a lot of people's minds, especially small business right now. And that is onboarding and retention for small businesses. And so, how are we getting people into the business, and then how are we keeping those employees? So we're going to jump right in this morning. We have some questions, have great discussion, so we'll just get started. So we're going to start with the very basics this morning, and this is just open to the floor. Let's talk about it for everybody who doesn't know. What exactly is onboarding? Don't everyone speak it on?
Yeah, I was about to say, not everyone at once.
Well, Sandra, you can certainly speak to this topic since you do so much recruiting, but I think onboarding, and this is a question you ask a little later when you talk about when it starts, Robert, but in theory, I think it starts from recruiting forward, and it's anything from new hire paperwork to equipment needs to background checks. So it's basically, in general, having someone ready to start working day one. And then when they show up day one, making them feel welcome and being organized to allow for a smooth welcome process.
Great explanation. Anyone want to add to that or build upon it?
I think onboarding as well, to extend to what Shannon said, it's not just that new hire first week or two. I think onboarding is how long you consider the time frame it takes for one to get acclimated in their role. So it goes beyond just that first week or two. I think it goes until, if it normally takes someone to understand the acronyms and understand, where everything is systematically and such. So it could be different for each company, but could it be 30 days? It could be 90 days for some companies, but I think that's all still part of onboarding.
Absolutely. It's that gap of time from offer until they can successfully complete their job. They're performing in their job at capacity. So like Renita said, however long that is.
Yeah.
It's that 90-day first impression.
Yeah.
Or however long, 90 days, 6 months. But I think you're leaving an impression of what the company is, what the business is, what it can do for them, and how they can impact the business as well. I think the more buy-in and incorporation you can have of these new employees into the business, they're more likely going to be excited beyond the 90 days, beyond the 6 months.
So I know Shannon touched on it briefly, but I'll just be curious to hear everyone's feedback on this as to when you feel the onboarding process really begins, and typically who's involved in that process?
Well, I'll say, just as Shannon said, it starts with that recruiter, that outreach. It starts also with just that posting, a way to introduce someone to the missions, the values of the company, to say, I want to even apply for this job. But then I also think it starts specifically from, it's the experience. So the experience of reaching out, the communications between the person who's actually interacting with the candidate, all the way through. So to me, it starts from the initial application or just the posting itself. Someone else may, want to extend beyond that, but I think that's where it starts.
Anyone else?
Why is everybody so quiet today?
I think to tag on to that, because we talked about it starting at recruiting, I know especially now with the labor market shortages, the employee to some extent, the candidate to some extent has a little bit of an upper hand. So it's important to make a good impression out of the gates, for example, with the job posting, make it look as if you're organized, or rather be organized, make a good impression, make them feel welcome, make them want the job because they have a lot of other opportunities. And then once they've started or once they've received an offer, continue that throughout the duration of their onboarding. So I mean, right now it starts minute one when you're engaging with that candidate, or at least soliciting candidates.
Yeah, I always say recruiting is the sales pitch, onboarding is the close. Just because someone accepts the job, those first couple of days and weeks are really impactful for an employee on whether or not they made the right decision.
Yeah.
It's critical.
Obviously, because prior to hitting record, we heard the stories of a couple of you getting involved in what was a really good sales pitch, and within hours of being in there, you were out because it was not what was portrayed. So it can happen. Just because somebody does get hired and they start doesn't mean that that's guaranteed, you know, that employee is going to stick around. You still have to maintain what your onboarding process is, what your culture is, and it has to be reflective both in the recruiting, the hiring, and the onboarding and beyond phase.
Right. And Robert, you asked about who all gets involved in onboarding, and I think it's really important that it's more than only the HR recruiting person. It really needs to include the new manager that's going to be managing, or even a peer, if they can have a peer that reaches out and starts a mentoring type helping relationship. Anything that can make that person who's coming feel like they're already part of the group and get engaged and excited about what they're going to do. So if you can convince other folks in the company to help take on some of that onboarding responsibility with you, it makes the process just go a lot better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, I've heard a lot of different things here, and this is great feedback. But obviously our audience in most instances is small businesses. Let's talk about it. So, you know, in business, and Deanna, you obviously know this, in starting a small business, you really want to understand, you know, what's the value of something? Why should we do this? What's going to be the value add to my company? So let's talk about that a little bit. You know, why should this be important to small business owners, and you know, what's the value in this for the business?
Comes to the bottom line, right?
Absolutely.
You just invested all these hours of time. You invested this money in posting the job. You invested time from your day to interview. You invested time in your support services in IT or whoever, getting prepared for this employee, organizing. Time and money is what is at stake. And so if onboarding is not done correctly, you might as well just take all your money and just set it on fire, because that's how important it is. It comes down to the bottom line. Got to be prepared.
And I think, oh, sorry. Well, I think also it allows them to do their job successfully. So it allows you to make certain you have a candidate that's happy and fits in and feels comfortable, but it also allows them to do their job well. And then there's profitability that connects directly to the profitability and success of the company as a whole. So there's truly no downside to putting time and energy into a clean onboarding process.
In small businesses as well, I would say that, you know, turnover is always costly, right? But in small businesses, it's even more costly because you have one person who might be wearing several different hats, and you need them to do all these different roles because you are a small business, and because you don't have, you know, separate positions for each role that you might need to have filled. And so turnover is even more costly for small businesses. And so if you can put time and energy into recruiting and onboarding and do it well, then your turnover rate will decrease. Likely will decrease.
Outside of the disruption, like in our world, we're service based and we're client facing. And so if you're not going to take the time up front to ensure that the person coming in is going to work out and is the right person for the organization, and that person is able to take the time to figure out if they're the right person for the organization, there's just so much disruption that happens both internally and externally to your customers and your clients. And which goes back to what Sandra said, time and money is what it always comes back to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's have a little fun here, and we don't name names. We're obviously not talking about existing clients, but all of you have extensive backgrounds in HR. So just want to have a little fun and talk about maybe some of the common issues or some of the most interesting things that you've seen in an onboarding process that maybe kind of, I don't know, broke the connection a bit and maybe was the missing piece in getting or keeping the employees that they wanted. Anybody?
Being unprepared. You know, if an employee walks in on day one and there's no computer for them, no phone, no place to sit, and they feel like they're an intrusion, no one has time to spend, you know, trying to help them train for their job. By stay, right?
You took the words out of my mouth, Rachel, because my experience, I was just thinking, okay, how do I refer to this without bringing up the name? And, you know, it's one of those things where, yes, you walk in, you don't really have the full instructions of badges. You know, I'm thinking of larger organizations. Okay. So whether it's smaller or bigger, and if you have access, make sure that you've included IT, the whole deployment process, so that they're getting their computer on time. The email is set up prior. You know, you guys did such a great job. I have to toot your horn for you all, because I saw everything that I needed like days before. My email was set up, everything was set up in the photo. I mean, in my, in my Outlook for meetings for the week or so ahead. That is really important so that employee can really feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing for the next 2 weeks. I know who I'm meeting with. And then as well, for the experience that I had, access, that there were systems that I needed access to that I couldn't get for days, waiting for approval or authorization. And then, you know, you're not accessing that information. So you feel like you're behind in the work, or you're not able to really receive the training, the hands-on training that you need. So I just think the whole IT process and having it, you know, step by step, who needs to do what, how many days before they start, is so important so that they can have that experience, Rachel, that you were referring to.
Renita, I would say that has been my biggest challenge, is convincing small businesses that they need to have an onboarding schedule for their new employees, because it's really easy for us to say like, oh, of course they'll meet with, you know, employee A, B, and C, and it won't be a problem, no big deal. We'll just shove them in, you know, at their lunchtime or whatever. But then lunchtime rolls around and they have other things to do, and their to-do list is, you know, 10 miles long, and they don't have time. And so, you know, I always tell clients that you need to have a 2-week at minimum onboarding schedule set, with calendar times and meetings set for people to meet with everyone. I think anyone in the company who they're going to be interacting with is important for them to be on their onboarding schedule. But I think that's where a lot of people sort of miss the mark and not put emphasis or importance behind an onboarding schedule.
Absolutely.
I agree. Being the second newest employee and team member of EA, I love the fact I had a 2-week onboarding schedule. I knew what I had to do when I had to do it. And then I knew that I had the time in between calls and the schedule to work on my own and dive into the things I wanted to dive into. The other thing I want to mention is that I knew from the get-go, I had team members to rely on. If I had questions, I could put faces with names, and I knew everyone was out there to support me and answer the questions I had. And I think that's really important, so an employee can feel comfortable in their role.
Yeah, and it might seem like it's like small business owners. So I'm trying to consider the business owner's perspective, and they probably think, well, that's going to take so much time. That's so overwhelming. But as we know, if you take the time up front, you create that onboarding process. After that, it's a plug and play. And so that you have it established, you don't have to reinvent it every single time, so that it does create that streamlined activity for you, and that creates the experience for the new employee at the same time.
Really by the manager setting all that up front and allowing them to have meetings set up with team members and other people of importance. They're really helping them build their web of contacts. so that the manager isn't the only person
Mhm.
supporting now. Other people are now available and are aware that the person is there and their responsibilities. So it really sets the manager up as well, be active and to have the employee in a place where they can be productive.
I also think, Robert, because you had said, let's have some fun. We've had, like, I'm a big advocate of onboarding checklists. I'm a big advocate of welcome letters if need be. Like Megan had said, having your calendar set up, having meetings, having other contacts. Candace, we talked about a mentor program, because I've had employees start at companies and day 3, I check in with them to see how their onboarding went and they don't know where the restrooms are. So it's easy to forget these little things. And then all of a sudden you just assume the person has learned how to navigate that. You just forget about them and you just assume they're good to go. And you forget about all these little things like giving a tour, showing them where the office supplies are, where the copier, how to use the copier. So making sure you think of even these small details, because otherwise someone's going 8 hours without using the restroom.
I was going to say, to go back to Robert's question about like a personal story about like an onboarding fail, I can recall in my youth, I was going to be a media sales executive. I went through this really crazy like 5 interview process or whatever, and they take anybody who has the right attitude. There's all this training that's supposed to happen and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I show up on my first day very excited, ready for my training plan. And they did not have my computer. Like I had a space, so I had a chair to sit at, but like my computer, like I didn't have an email yet. I didn't have access to like the customer database. There were people that I was scheduled to go with, but they didn't want to take me because it would take up too much of their time, and they might have to share their sales with me. It was terrible. I sat at that chair. I wandered to the bathroom. I found that on my own. They also had like a calming Zen space where you could go in. I spent a lot of time there between the bathroom and Zen space because no one wanted to talk to me or help me because they were a terrible group of people, which is why they had so much turnover. I mean, you learn, right? And they weren't prepared for me. Like I couldn't even do anything like my first couple of days. I lasted 2 weeks.
Sandra,
Like
I hope you did like can I have an exit interview? I
Yeah.
have some feedback to give.
I was like, hey.
Did they even know that you left? Did they?
Yes. Well, and that was the thing too. So like my direct manager, she was lovely. I did not see her for a whole week, and she was on my onboarding training schedule.
Wow. So
Like
they
I
had
go
a
in her
schedule,
office
they
and
didn't
she's
even
like
abide
on the
by
phone.
it?
She's like, just give me a minute. Just give me. What? Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible.
Yeah. See, I had the same thing happen before I started Employers Advantage when I first moved to Charlotte, and I got a job at a company in Charlotte. It was a smaller business, but it was a director of HR role. And yeah, I showed up for my first day and I was super excited, and nobody knew who I was, what I was there for. I was supposed to report to the controller guy, whoever he was. I don't even remember his name, but he, yeah, I mean, I remember walking in and standing at the front, like waiting for an hour or so, kind of poking around, waiting for somebody to come around. And I remembered where his office was from the interview. And I went, knocked on the door, and he's like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "First day, where do I go?" And then all he did was he goes, "Here's your office." He walked me to the office, and that was it. And I sat down, and that literally was it. My login information was there, so I was able to get in the computer, but I had no idea what was happening, where to find. I had no idea. And I think I was there 30 days, maybe. I don't think I was there a month. Because I mean, it was just horrible. And it went on like there was no assimilation to the organization whatsoever. My second week there was Halloween. And this is when I knew it was probably time to go. The owner, outside of the horrible onboarding thing, the owner rented a limo and took only the women out to the bar for Halloween.
Oh my gosh.
Including his mistress, that was his executive assistant. It was fun.
Oh,
Well,
Anyway,
now you have a story to tell. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
You enjoyed that story, smash that like button for more content.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of scandal, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about onboarding. Anyway, there was, no reason for me to stay there because even after 2 or 3 weeks, I still had no idea what was going on. I certainly tried my best, but it was tough.
I think taking that Deanna story and shifting a little bit to what you said in the beginning was that I think oftentimes we also forget to celebrate the new people, right? And so people come in and they're like, who do I go to? What do I, if you can just send an email out or even just in person, if you're in the office, notify, hey, Deanna's coming in today. It's her first day. Let me know when she walks through the door. Because we want them to be celebrated. We're excited for them to be here. We hired them. We were excited to hire them. Theoretically, hopefully you were excited to hire them. So celebrate them when they walk through the door, however that transpires for your business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we can all agree that onboarding is just a valuable piece for small businesses in regards to helping new employees go through the process, feel welcome, feel valued, feel like they were expected to be there, and just create a great first impression. But let's transition a little bit now to I'm here, I've been here, I'm part of the family, and now let's look at retention. So this is something, again, front and center today. So it's a very competitive market. Sandra, I think you mentioned that, oftentimes the employees now have some of the leverage, so to speak, and the opportunity to kind of explore what's out there. So let's talk about retention. What are some of the things that small businesses can do to help retain those employees? They've been here for a while. What are some of the things they can do now to retain some of their employees?
I think that the check-in is important after. I think there's a way to do it if you're, small company or larger company, just to have like a survey. I don't want to go into what Sandra said, which it's that stay survey or stay interview instead of extra interview. I love that. I'm sure she can talk more about that here, but I think that's important to actually reach out to employees in that onboarding process and beyond, at least that first 6 months. Even if you have a 30-day where it's just simple questions that you can ask their feedback or how things are going, or like that old suggestion box. If you've been in the manufacturing environment, you take that suggestion box away, but how about, asking them questions or getting their recommendation and suggestions through a survey. Then have that information to follow through on, because it's the worst thing to do a survey and not follow through with some of the information that you receive. So whether it's 30 days, 60 days, and maybe after 6 months, that's a really good way for employees to say they're still reaching out, they're interested in knowing how I am doing in the organization.
I think the biggest thing too is just making no assumptions. So you do not need to presume that what's making your employees satisfied. I mean, what you did maybe a year or even 6 months ago is not correct or up to date. So I just agree with what Renita says, and just taking those engagement surveys and really getting a pulse on how your employees are doing, because they may have some really great feedback for your onboarding process that you weren't even aware of. So I think just a big thing is just making no assumptions.
Absolutely. So so there are some industries, some companies in some industries who just accepted high turnover rate as their norm. So they expect high turnover rate. It's just a part of what they experience. They kind of live with it and they go with it. And we've seen that happen. What would you say to those companies in regards to the importance of, or why is it important for them to try to not only hire the right employees, but then retain those employees? Why is that important for those who just say, you know what, we're just going to be high turnover. That's just what we experience. It's our industry. It's whatever it may be, the workforce, whatever it may be. Why should it be important to those small business owners?
I think somebody had said before, time and money.
Mhm.
Turnover is a high cost proposition. And wouldn't it be great if you're the one in the industry that has a different reputation?
Mhm.
You know, like, well, yeah, everybody else has high turnover. People come here and really like to come here. So guess what? More people are going to be attracted to come to your company then.
And as you always say, Robert, to be that employer of choice. And that's part of that, what Rachel just said, you know, to be that company that sees it differently.
And as Shannon pointed out earlier, again, it goes back to, oh gosh, I just forgot. Never mind.
Shannon, what'd you say earlier?
Earlier. Oh, productivity. And yes, that's what it is. Productivity. If you're constantly being disruptive and there's disruption in the business, productivity and efficiency are going to go down. And that's always tied back to money and time. So you're just hurting your business. Again, just go set some money on fire. It might be more fun, you know?
Ah!
Everybody, let's get together and throw the money in the pit. Team building experience.
Well, and I mean,
On
you know,
fire.
and on top of that, you know, with social media and just people just voicing their opinions now, you know, you want to have good corporate exposure. You don't want someone going onto LinkedIn and just saying what a terrible experience that you've had as a part of this employer. What's going to make your colleagues want to, or you know, people that, you know, are looking for a new job, what's going to, you know, make them want to look at the company that you're working for when you've had such a negative experience. So, I mean, yeah, you want to build greater employee satisfaction and better customer experience overall. And I mean, nowadays with just social media, the way that it is, people can just voice their opinions over companies like it's just nothing. So you want to make sure that you have a good, you know, corporate profile online. It's really important, just the way that, you know, words can get out to people.
I would also say that if you say that you have high turnover and that's just our industry and the way it is, you're just creating an excuse. And maybe you should be asking the question, why do we have such high turnover and how can we change things? It's like how people always say, like, well, we've always done it that way. Well, why have you always done it that way and how can we change it? So maybe we should be asking different questions.
I also think we talked a little bit, you talked about customer experience, Ellen, but if this is a position that's client facing, like your jobs, Deanna, we want to look like we're prepared. We want that person to look like they're prepared. And in a situation where maybe you're transitioning a client to a new business partner, you want that to be a smooth transition. So this transition in and of itself being smooth and organized trickles down and makes any external interactions look smooth and organized.
So is there anything that anyone would point out maybe that should be essential in any sort of retention plan? Like any one thing you see, if you create a plan of retention, you know, you need this component. This has to be there. Is there anything, and maybe there isn't, I don't know, but if there is, I'd love to hear it.
Communication, super simple, super simple. Open communication. And that sounds really simple. It's super difficult. You have to make time for it, whether it's in an informal scheduled call. That sounds more formal. But anyway, whether it's just an informal conversation with your employees, whether it's like this survey or this interview, there has to be an acceptance and an openness to hearing feedback from your employees. And second, you have to be willing to do something about it. So if you can't commit to hearing and being open to, or if you can't commit to taking action, then your retention plan is not going to be successful.
And I think the word that most employers can look at is to ask, what does engagement looks like? Because to engage, that means you're having good communications. You have open communications because you have to have a two-way, conversation. And goes back to, the feel, like, how does the person feel? So that engagement is the big thing. And how does that look? What does that look like in your organization? And when you start with engagement, that's when all those things fall underneath to set the plan.
It just so happens that Sandra wrote an article for our website about employee retention.
Yeah,
and there
check
are
out our blog.
Yes, there are 3 helpful tips.
If you want more, give us a call. We'll help you fill that whole retention thing out.
I love that stay interview versus the exit interview. I loved it.
We implemented that in an organization. We had a lot of turnover within our manufacturing facility, and we were having drop off like after that 60-day mark, like, whoa. So we kind of lived at that plant for a while. We got very all up in employees in business. We asked a lot of questions. We stayed very connected to them, and it made a difference. You know, they definitely felt like they were on an island. You know, we had core corporate office, and down the road, across the bridge, across the river, we had our manufacturing plant. They felt disconnected, unappreciated. Yeah, I mean, like we didn't even see them. I mean, they just went to the plant, and then there was, you know, the ivory tower that we went to every day. So it was really important. It was huge. Those state interviews really helped us to ask the important questions, to look at the data in a meaningful way, and then to take action. Super easy.
Yeah.
So
I know we're talking about recruiting, sorry, Robert, recruiting and retention, or attracting and retaining, but there's, you know, there's also such a thing as good turnover, as long as it's not because of bad situations. Turnover for people to grow into new positions and to go on into their career, that kind of stuff. I mean, that is not necessarily what we're talking about, right? We're looking at making sure that processes and culture is stable to create an environment where people can flourish, and, you know, they're not going to stick around forever. It's human nature to want to go on and do other things. So if you're creating a supportive environment in which there's healthy turnover, that's one thing. But recruiting and retaining is just a good business practice to keep your costs low, keep productivity high, and keep people happy.
I think that goes back to what you just said, Deanna, as well, the internal turnover. So growth opportunities, you know, growth doesn't always mean title change. Sometimes it just means, you know, someone that wants, you know, stretch assignments and just to be challenged differently and learn more. So those are the positive things when you have turnover that's due to those reasons.
Yeah.
So I can hear our small business audience now going, you know, I only have X number of employees. You know, this doesn't fit for me because we only have 6 people that work here. We only have 8 people. Is there any small business outside of maybe, you know, someone who's a solopreneur? Is there any small business really that should not, if they're hiring employees, is there a wrong size business to need to have an onboarding and retention plan?
Everybody all at once.
I mean, Robert, you said it. I mean, you have 6 employees, 1 person leaves. Oh my goodness, how much of your business stops or is interrupted or affected? It's extremely important, regardless of number. You make the investment in your employees. It's like a nice car, right? You don't buy a super fancy car and then never take it for maintenance, or it's just gonna not work. And then you don't have a ride anywhere. Just complicates things, right? Anyway, but yeah, super important no matter the number. I just need to be quiet.
Absolutely. No, that's great. That's a great point. And that's exactly where we're going with this. Employers Advantage is here just for that. So regardless of employee headcount, if you're looking to grow, it's important to understand the partnership of HR. So if you don't have an HR partner, it's fine. Employers Advantage is here for that. If you have an HR professional, it's fine. We're still here and able to provide guidance when necessary. So either way, Employers Advantage is here. I hope you've enjoyed our live recording for September. I hope it's been informative and somewhat entertaining. And we'll see you guys next month.